A couple of years after its announcement, and after much speculation as to whether it will drop at all, the Heart of Invictus documentary was released. And I don't know if it was a coincidence, but it was released the day before the 26th anniversary of Princess Diana's death. Now, many people have sworn to boycott the documentary, and it looks like they've kept their word. As of the day of filming, it's failed to make Netflix's top 10 list, unlike the family-bashing, orchestrated reality show from last December, and also unlike Suits, which has been seeing a massive revival over the past couple of months. Gee, I wonder if WME had anything to do with that. Although it doesn't seem to be doing that bad outside of the Netflix ratings, especially in comparison to the Harry and Meghan show. But I suppose these external reviews don't really matter to Netflix, right? You know, what matters is its own viewership. And this one doesn't seem to be delivering. Of course, I watched all 5 episodes pretty much as soon as it was released. And as with everything, I approached it with an open mind, meaning I was ready to like it or even love it. And to my surprise, there were many aspects of it that I actually really enjoyed, including the gripping stories of the veterans themselves and the fact that Meghan Markle was less than an afterthought throughout the entire thing. She wasn't even a side character. She was like an NPC, a non-playable character in a video game that was only there 2% of the time, if that. Now, you may have heard that Harry has made the documentary all about himself. That's sort of the narrative that the media has decided to go with. But that's actually not true. Yes, he does serve as a host for the most part, but the vast majority of the focus was most definitely on the veterans themselves, 6 competing veterans in particular, where the cameras followed them around and told us their story. But despite the exaggeration, there were a few moments where Harry would bring up his personal trauma surrounding not any war or PTSD post-war, but, you guessed it, his mother. Speaking of his mother, before I get any further into the documentary, he and Meghan, along with Doria and both friends, I believe Abigail Spencer and Genevieve, were photographed and captured, even on video, dancing the night away at a Beyonce concert, I believe the day after the anniversary of Princess Diana's death. Now, the media, of course, is branding it as inappropriate, not just because they're royals and the way they're behaving in public is unbecoming of royals, but also because it was so close to the anniversary of Diana's passing. I don't know, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, on the one hand, it has been 26 years, and we've all been saying, move on, Harry, live your life, Harry, let your mother go, Harry. So it's interesting that the media is saying, oh, it's inappropriate, he's not observing her death. But on the other hand, it does make one question whether all the trauma that he professes to, harbor surrounding his mother's death may be slightly exaggerated. Personally, I don't know. I mean, it wasn't on the day itself. Maybe he was sad and reflective on the 31st of August. Who knows? Also, people have different ways of coping. So I personally don't have a very strong opinion on this sighting. It's just another media headline, which is exactly what Meghan wanted, and potentially why a sugar of all people happened to get free tickets to this concert and was the very one who captured photos of them. Now, the video was courtesy of Kinsey Schofield's friend. It wasn't exclusive on Talk TV, so all credit to them. As for the comment of, them being royals and this being inappropriate, I mean, come on. Dancing in public at a concert and, shaking your little tush is hardly the least royal thing that Meghan Markle has done in the past few years, if you catch my drift. If you listen to the media without watching the documentary, you will potentially get a warped version of what the documentary was actually about, which is that it was all about Harry, And all he did was whine and complain about his mother and the media. But as I just said, that's not necessarily the truth. And you know that I would be the last person to defend Harry's honor. But regardless of how I may feel about him and his antics personally, I'm going to be fair and say that overall, it was a pretty good documentary. But unfortunately, the few sentences that were uttered by Harry every now and then, they were dispersed, entirely overshadowed it. Which begs the question, what on earth did Harry actually say that's gotten the media so riled up? Well, as usual, he's been accused of attempting to rewrite history. Now, whether he did it on purpose or whether he was earnest in his words, I mean, I think that giggle that slipped through says it all. I have no idea, really. For instance, he claimed that he never received any support once he returned from deployment, I believe in 2012 when he was 28 years old.
The biggest struggle for me was the people, no one around me really could help. I didn't have that support structure, that network, or that expert advice to identify what was actually going on with me.
Here is a clip from a 2017 podcast where he had this to say about his supposed arch nemesis, his own darling brother, Prince William.
You know, for me personally, you know, my brother, you know, bless him, he was a huge support to me and kept saying, you know, this is not right, this is not normal, you need to talk about stuff, it's okay, and all this, and the timing wasn't right.
Now, the media have taken this and have spun a narrative of he's trying to attack his family again. And that may very well be so. I mean, look at who we're dealing with. It is his modus operandi after all. But I do like to play devil's advocate. And if we do that, you could argue, if you listen carefully to what he said, that he didn't have the expert professional help that he needed at the time. Not necessarily the support of his family members. But is that believable? Especially given that he was a prince who practically had his pick of the best practitioners in the country and who was encouraged by his own brother to seek their help. I don't know if I buy it. I mean, if he didn't get the help he needed, the way I see it, it's because he didn't want to or he wasn't ready to, rather than being unable to. It reminds me of how Meghan claimed to be unable to get the help that she needed when she was allegedly going through her own mental struggles. It's just not believable, especially when you consider the Heads Together Foundation that William and Catherine and Harry founded together, and the importance of mental health and the way they would speak about it nonstop, even before Meghan joined the family. Yeah, sorry, something just really seems amiss. Maybe Harry was just spinning this narrative to fit in better with the veterans and show them, oh, look, I've been through, you know, the same position as you. But if it's not true, I mean, why lie about it? It just doesn't look good whichever way you try to see it. Now, as for the media, unlike his family, I believe they were very much clearly in his sights, and he was on the offensive, as he always is. And so it wasn't surprising when he accused them of obsessively covering his deployment rather than the real impacts of the war, including the wounded and the dead.
I was angry that this has happened to these guys. I was angry that the media weren't covering it. I was angry that I'd been pulled out.
If there was ever a straw that broke the media camel's back, it was this one. All hell unleashed, with the sun being at the tip of the spear in this battle. I mean, get a load of this headline. Trash Harry. Bitter, deluded, and addled by hatred, Prince Harry shamelessly rewrites history yet again. We won't have it. I was just a child in 2007, but even I remember how there was constant coverage of the war and the soldiers and the wounded. And that's without considering the countless reporters who unfortunately had to lose their lives in the midst of this conflict as they were bravely covering it. Something which Bunker Harry wouldn't know anything about, you know, being in the thick of it, because he was too precious, unlike the rest of us. The Sun in particular not only covered everything, but also started a campaign, a fundraiser for the soldiers and their families. So yet another lie spectacularly backfires in his face. I mean, clearly the man has learned nothing. And way to kick the hornet's nest and take away from the good of the Invictus Games, Harry. Because all of the headlines have been negativity galore. You know, it's such a shame that Prince Harry, as his reputation currently stands, and even Meghan Markle, are affiliated with the Invictus Games, because it is such a great cause. I don't think anyone is disputing that. And had Harry not veered away from that path, it would have been his legacy. But rather than focusing on what the documentary was meant to be about, which was the bravery and resilience and perseverance of these wounded veterans who, despite the odds, have managed to fight their demons and emerge victorious, ended up being lambasted by the media because of a few brief statements that were uttered by Prince Harry. And therein lies the problem. As long as Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are affiliated with any good cause, not just Invictus, they are always going to serve as a bad distraction because they want to be. That entire documentary wouldn't have lost an iota of substance had Harry chose to leave out these personal jabs against the media and his family, if that was indeed a jab. But he just had to put it in, didn't he? And that's what the media chose to latch onto, largely ignoring the really great aspects of the documentary, which was pretty much 95 to 98% of it, really. I mean, for a man who's been in the public eye for 40 years, practically, you'd think he knows by now how the media is like a bloodhound. You know, they sniff out the blood and just choose to chase it. Negativity sells. When do we ever see good news in the media? And as someone with a military background, I was really invested in the stories of these veterans. So when I saw that the media was just pretending it never happened and were focusing on the few brief statements Harry made, I just went, "You did it, Harry. Oops, you did it again." The issue is, no matter what Harry says at this point, you just can't take anything he says seriously. For example, there's this part, I believe it was right at the beginning of the documentary, where Harry is giving an opening speech at the games when they were held in The Hague last year. And he had this to say about raising his son Archie.
When I talk to my son Archie about what he wants to be when he grows up, some days it's an astronaut, other days it's a pilot. But what I remind him is that no matter what you want to be when you grow up, it's your character that matters most.
I'm sorry, but as valiant as that notion is, it just rings hollow considering the man that it emanates from. A man who continuously preaches the value of family and friends and relationships and connections, but who consistently fails to observe the sanctity of these relationships in his own life. We see in the documentary children being separated from their veteran parents, or just separated by virtue of the war itself. We see families getting torn apart by conflict and war, which they had no hand in instigating, and wish for nothing more than to see it come to an end. And then we have Harry and his wife, the instigators of family conflict, warmongers in their own right. So it's not just the media's fault for latching on to the negative and amplifying it. Harry's very character, along with his wife, entirely overshadows the good that is meant to be represented by the Invictus Games. And I fear that as long as Harry continues down this path that he's been on for the past few years, his reputation as the moaning, lying, hypocritical prince will follow him everywhere he goes, denigrating every project that he attaches himself to. But if this is to be the case, well, you know what they say about karma. It's a